Welcome to the Misophonia podcast. This is season 5, episode 9. My name's Adil Ahmad, and I have Misophonia. This week, my conversation is with Bryan. This is a really special conversation for me. All my interviews are special because we all have this thing in common and many other things, it turns out. But this was kind of crazy because our life situations are even more similar. It's a good long one, clocking in at over an hour, and we really get into some of my quote-unquote favorite topics, like the distance that builds up between family members when you're growing up with misophonia. I probably said this before, but if there's just one thing that comes out of all these conversations, it's that, a better understanding that this thing hurts, and that hurt sticks a lot longer than people realize. Having said that, there's a lot of laughing along the way in this conversation to go with all that raw talk. And having said that, there's also maybe a little cursing here and there that comes with when we all get kind of rolling, with joking around. All in all, it's super insightful, honest conversation that I'll definitely be listening back to multiple times. I'm happy to say a couple more people are supporting the show through the Patreon page, Colin and Julia. Thank you so much. The Patreon is super easy to find at patreon.com/Misophonia podcast. And over there, you can read all about all the things that I've got coming up for the show, and find out about all the t-shirts and mugs and swag that I can send your way. An even easier way to help reach more misophones like you is to just leave a quick rating or review wherever you get the podcast if you haven't done that already. And if you want to just reach out, hello@misophoniapodcast.com. Anytime you can email me or find us on Instagram or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast. And you can find the links to all those things in the show notes. All right, let's get to my conversation with Bryan. Cool. Well, Bryan, welcome to the podcast then. Good to have you here.
Thanks, Adil.
So, yeah. So, yeah, it's gonna be fun. I guess whereabouts are you? If you wanna let the people know.
Yeah, so I live in Colorado, just in the foothills outside of Denver.
Ah, okay, nice. Yeah, I know a few people down there. And so you're in tech, it sounds like.
I am. Yeah.
Okay,
Been in
cool.
consulting tech for about 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Software side or
software side, yeah,
okay.
Cloud-based platforms, things like that. But yeah,
wow. Yeah, I've recently jumped back into consulting in the last actually less than a month or so on the software, mostly cloud kind of stuff. So we'll have to maybe compare notes after at another time. But
like out of the gate, I kind of got into consulting just because the cube life, if you will, back in my day when you started, it was all about cubicle farms. And
that was my day too. Yeah,
it was horrid. It was absolutely terrible because one of these 77 things that makes me go into a tailspin is the sound of hammering on keyboards.
Yep.
And it was dread. So let me try that traveling thing because people aren't annoying on planes. This should be fine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's hear. I guess let's hear about. I guess yeah. I mean, work. Really. Well, actually, let's talk about. I guess pandemic have things then gone better for you since the pandemic, because now you're not, you're obviously not in an office, and you're definitely not flying. What did you think of the pandemic? For misophonia, obviously, it's been tragic for many other people.
Exactly. The emotional toll aside.
Yeah.
And I guess the selfless battle that we're in now, as far as things that are politicized, all of that removed. Pandemic was pretty good from a perspective of, control is the common behavior of those of us who have this affliction. And it's not like control and being like, I want everyone to walk this way and go that direction. No, it's like we just need to control our environments. And I know I'm saying something that's been ad nauseum on this podcast, but it's the pandemic highlighted a few things to me, but also coming out of it, quote unquote, has been interesting because I've been in a few instances these last few weeks where I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot I hated doctor's offices. So yeah, this is horrible. Just in the waiting room alone, just that moment was like 15 minutes of panic. But overall okay, but emotional toll. like a lot of us who
Of
have
course.
this, I have the comorbidities, if you will, of depression and all those things. So those are always there. They're always on the surface. So,
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I guess maybe, um, yeah, I think we're all probably aware of some of your, it sounds like work triggers are a
mhm.
big deal for you. Yeah, you want to talk about I guess maybe going back to, your career and how
Mhm.
misophonia has, I know this is going to be probably a long thing, but feel free to, yeah, elaborate on how kind of like misophonia has affected your career.
It's a lot of hiding in uh, hotel, areas, in offices. Hotel, the term is hiding out in conference rooms that weren't, you know, occupied just to escape certain things. And I've heard in previous discussions you've had with others where, like in the tech world, like I don't know when this became a thing, a deal, but hey, let's give everyone cereal with bowls and ceramic and spoons, and it's like that's the worst
Oh
because
yeah.
you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about. And
in like the in like the fridges and the breakout rooms and stuff, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like, hey, if I can hit this thing as many times as possible, this won't annoy anyone. And I'm in the corner absolutely wanting to jump off the building. And it's just,
Well,
it's,
it's
it's,
when the companies start to bring more quote unquote like home life like benefits and
right.
just the comfiness of home into the office, and it just went from basic snacks to like like 5 course meals kind of thing, and all the full on cutlery. The cutlery, yeah. I mean, it went
Yeah.
from
We
like
want you here
it's not just
forever.
a yeah, it's not just like here's paper towels here. Here's like an entire fine china in the
Yeah.
cabinets kind of thing.
I
So,
think professionally, it's been, for those that aren't aware, like when you're in business consulting, a lot of times it's a road warrior sense where you would travel Monday morning to a place in the US or globally, and you'd come home Thursday or Friday, and it's this constant, it's a
mhm.
structure, and it goes back to that control element. So I'm very much in a groove of knowing how I operate in a business dinner and like always having to have the corner seat. We all know what it's like to have someone sitting behind us, and oh my God, if they chew with their mouth open, this is going to be a long night. Um,
And
so
you
it's
have to be you have to kind of be on because you're kind of like selling yourself at all times as a consultant, right? It's not you're kind of
yeah,
working for yourself, so that's kind of an added layer of stress, I'm sure.
yeah, and it's interesting because it's as in the business
You
world in
can't just freak
general.
out and
No, no, you can't, and you also can't. The dread of having to explain it. It's like, hey,
yeah,
do you mind closing your mouth when you chew? That's not weird, right? Um,
right.
and it always makes it a weird conversation of, oh, let's dig into this because everyone, and I don't want to use the term gaslight, but like it kind of goes down that vein of everyone wants to oversimplify it because it's the human condition. They want this easy button. They want this, oh, well, can't you just take a pill for that? And I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
if you only knew, we wish we could.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's the it's the double sided coin of I don't want to have to even bring it up, and then I definitely don't want to have to explain it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Right,
because
because the
going back,
probability once you go through those hoops, the probability that it's going to be successful just seems so low that it's almost not worth it.
no,
Almost
it
not
never
worth it.
is. And it's, I mean, you're always, yeah, it's always small talk, anyways, in those kind of settings. But
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it goes back to everyone can date myself now and do the math, but it was 30 years ago. I was 14. I was lying on the floor watching the television. My father was behind me, and he started eating ice cream behind me. And I never realized, my father sounded like a rhinoceros, chewing on a thing of bananas. But that moment, from that moment forth, it was just like my world changed. And not
Wow,
just mine.
so that was
Yeah,
the yeah. So that was the moment for you. Like you
I
you
remember
do
it
remember it. Yeah.
vividly. Yeah, yeah.
Was there something about what you were watching together? Was it like a kind of a bonding moment that was interrupted? I'm just curious about what may have happened
Yeah.
around that time, if there was any kind of correlation to something.
I will say I had some angst towards my father. Um, so I did have a bit of tension with him,
Mm.
teenage boy. I have an older brother. But
Yeah, because you're
I
early
was,
high school at that point.
Early high school,
So
yeah. And I
yeah.
was struggling. We just moved to a different place. It was new. You know, when you're at that age, moving somewhere new, it's always a lot of stress for anybody.
Mm,
And I was kind of anti-dad at that point in my life.
hmm
And
hmm
I always wonder, I'm like, is it like, was I seeking something out that then just became this thing? And
hmm
mind you, I say all these as, pontificating like what isn't real. And then in 2010 or 12, when all of us found out, oh no, there's a name for it, and it was like, oh, and I'm not gonna lie, like that was a moment. I kind of just sat down and had a moment of just relief because I've always felt like, why am I so angry? And
hmm
everyone's always this, my parents would always assume I was moody. Be like,
Yeah.
God, he's always got an attitude. No, you guys were eating cereal. Like it wasn't, they always thought it was something so much more complex. And I'm like, no, it's the way dad eats yogurt. Like, it's like, what are you talking about?
Well, it's because I think we're as well. I think parents are kind of programmed to expect the worst of teenagers and all that kind of complicated, moody stuff. And so,
Right.
and sometimes I can see how they can kind of just assume that's what it is, and then that just further creates distance because we're like, no, it's actually simpler but weirder, but still, it's not just the teenage thing
I
because
wanted
look,
to turn,
yeah,
I wanted to turn the tables a bit over to you and actually bring up a topic I was thinking about, which was the blurred line of misophonia and what we experience, and then folks just being inconsiderate.
hmm
And it really plays to, I loathe selfishness, and I don't know where that comes from, but it's part of all this. Is I'm a very selfless person. I'm always wondering why, how can that person be doing that? And
yeah, the
it's like people who
judginess,
play loud music. Yeah, it's the
right?
judginess. I'm curious, what's more stressful to a deal? Not knowing the source of the noise or knowing the source of the noise?
Huh.
Does that make
Yeah, that's
sense?
interesting because not knowing, I think in some situations I'd be like speculating on where it's coming from. I might even like
Hmm.
assign a yeah.
My wife has asked me this question, and I don't know how to, because she's like, you seem to go crazy either way. And she
Yeah,
says it lovingly. Clear, we've been
yeah,
married a long time. Um, but it's drawn a question where I'm like, I don't know. Like if you hear, like when you lived in apartments years ago, it's like you hear a
yeah.
thump or something, you're like, what is that? Um, versus just knowing in front of you someone making a noise that's driving you
So the
bananas.
thing, yeah, so that's the interesting because I think if I don't know where it is, I'll pretty quickly, and I think we're both engineers or in the
Hmm.
engineering kind of field. I'll I'll find a way to try to figure out where it's coming from, even if it's like kind of really trying to
Right.
listen carefully. And so I
You
will
go on the
get to
hunt.
the root cause. Yeah, I'll look for the root cause as soon as possible. So then I'll know where it's coming from. Whether I'm correct or not is another question. But I think
Right.
I'll get to the point where I think I know where it's coming from. So I think I will try to veer towards that certainty. And I think it's probably because my brain, the misophonia slash whatever,
Yeah.
needs a target, because
I
it thinks that it's being targeted.
I think that's what it is. And I've realized I need to know what it is. And then I go to stage two. Now that I know what it is, why are they doing that? Or whatever it is that might be making that noise. Um, but yeah, we
Well,
all know the
I
hotel room
mean,
with the drip.
for that, well, stage two for me is pretty quick because I just assume that they have no awareness of no consideration for anyone around them, and
Well,
so
that's,
then
yeah,
that
that's
moves on
it.
to stage three,
I
which
actually, I wrote down all the things of mine. So as I go through these and noises, I did want to like clear up very
hmm
quickly. Like, so around its mouths, chewing, smacks. One of your guests used the term after chewing, which
oh
I
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
blown away by because I was like, yes, that. And my wife, God bless her, I love her. She does after chew, and I'm just like, like you're killing me.
So is
Um,
after chewing and with um at the risk, and I'll take this
uh-huh,
out if it gets too descriptive. But so the
yeah.
after chewing, again, for those who may not have heard before, is that referred to potential? What does that refer to you?
For me, that
Is it
plays to
swallowing or is it the cleaning of the teeth with the tongue kind of to
it's
get
the
ready for the next?
latter.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, okay. Say no more. I think we all know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Gotcha.
that one resonated with me. I'd never heard it before, but I was like, oh, there's a name for that. And I coined, whomever coined that from your podcast, I was like, props. That was wonderful. Other ones are just silverware on plates and bowls, which has
Yeah,
made it super fun. Clicking pens, keyboard
yeah,
typing, sniffing.
yeah, yeah,
People
yeah.
people who won't blow their nose.
Casual
Uh,
sniffing too. It's like you don't need to. You're not sick. What's going on? Like
exactly.
it's just you doing it because out of habit, which is even worse. So at
And then
least in this in my mind.
yeah, and then the consideration things, which is like, if I ever, I lived in Texas for a long time, and people there put TVs in their backyards,
Oh
and
boy.
my stress, like exactly a deal. You just summed it up. So it's like the minute I would see my neighbor with a TV being put up, I'm like, oh dear God, because then I get to listen to whatever garbage they're going to listen to in their
Yeah.
backyard,
I
and
mean,
it's
there
the
are
worst.
situations where it might be like, okay, maybe it's a neighborhood movie night. It's been planned for
Sure.
days, and then you can deal with it. You know,
Yeah.
you could join in maybe if it's like, but I think it's that the surprise slash. It is kind of inconsiderate to just blast TV. I
Yeah,
think it's
and
probably a bit universal.
it plays to a lot of the dread,
Right.
that plays to
Right.
a lot of the discussions. So
Yep. Yep. Okay. Um, right. So we'd let's maybe go back to
mhm.
the I guess yeah, the teenage years. So what happened then after that? After the ice cream incident, was it
Mhm.
you basically the next like from that moment on, like the next
Yeah.
day and every day afterwards, um, it, uh, did it start to multiply pretty quickly? The number of sounds, like was everything starting to bother you then from your dad?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep. Yep.
It started with him, and I think the hardest part I've had is that even then I would try to address it as well as you can with a very low emotional intelligence as a teenager,
Yeah.
to try to address like, hey, this is something I think bothers me a lot. And I have the quintessential family that's like, oh, it bothers you, so we're going to make fun of you for that.
Oh
So it
Jesus.
just, yeah, so it was kind of weaponized. And I have a brother who's a year older than me, and he knew it was something that bothered me. So naturally, like any empathetic human being, he doubled down and made it worse, like to me. So I would say for a large part of my teenage years, I was hunkered in my room with like a pillow wrapped around my head, just at certain moments in time, just either avoiding the moment or just hiding from
So
specific situations.
how did they find out? Was it they could see you visibly uncomfortable, or
Yeah.
did you try to tell them
Um, I
first?
would
I
say
mean,
early on, it was a lot of
yeah,
passive aggressive, kind of
yeah,
like, I think there's been a mimicry comment made in previous podcasts, and it was kind of like that. So if I would hear something, I would mimic it.
hmm
Um, there was probably some of that, which they were probably confused more. Like, I always got the "why is Bryan so angry" treatment. Like, well, you just got to let that kind of stuff go. You got to just stop being so mad all the time.
yeah, yeah,
It was like, um, I'm not very supportive, Adil. I'm not going to lie. Like, looking back, our parents do the best they can. I'm a parent now. There's no real good guidebook on being the best parent, but there's also the element of, hey, just being cool. And I just never thought people were being very cool about it when I was growing up. I felt like they just made it worse.
well, yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah. I mean, it seems weird. It would seem weird to me to um if something's wrong. I mean, I think in general, hopefully there's a little bit more awareness now, not enough for misophonia, but
Right.
that something's bothering somebody, you don't go and antagonize it. I hope we're moving towards that in a society,
Yeah.
but back in the day, I'm basically your age. Yeah, that was
Mhm.
pretty not the case.
No,
And before that even more so.
I think I'm really excited about really the world my daughter's growing up in, from a sense of that empathy and understanding and being kind. And we've got a ways to go. Watch the news for 5 minutes.
Yep.
Um,
No, I don't do
But
that anymore, but yeah.
no, exactly. That was a test you passed. But no, like you can minimize the stressors and just be good and kind to each other. And that's, I'm trying to raise my daughter just to be a good person and all that. But like you go back in time, just even seeing a therapist was, you know, it wasn't seen as like, oh yeah, talking to people, it's very helpful. It was like, oh, you're talking to a therapist. Like, what's going on?
Remember it was called, not long before we were teenagers, and
Uh-huh.
we were called an analyst. So it wasn't even about therapy. It was just like
Exactly.
somebody analyzing you, and then who knows if you can get any help. It was just, they were just going to basically reflect what they were going to tell you that something's wrong with you without really trying
Yeah.
to give you therapy. So
And
yeah.
I can share again vividly.
Yeah.
It's 6 months or so after that moment, uh, anger, all those kind of things. And this was my introduction to the SSRI world that
Yeah.
I have very, very, very often frequented.
SSRI, you
And
mean antidepressants, right?
yeah. So all the flavors, I've got all the Yelp reviews out there on all of them. But the main thing is when I went to this, as you said, analyst, my parents went in the room with me.
Oh God.
This was exactly. So it's like the weirdest moment of
Well,
probably my.
this is the 90s too, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
not like, okay, wow.
No, and it was wild because they were like, we're just very concerned about him, and then everyone's just kind of look at you, and you like have this weird FBI spotlight on you, and you're like, yeah. So can they leave? Is HIPAA a thing yet? It's like how how can I be myself if I'm like basically in no different of a situation than my family living here? It's like this is ridiculous. So didn't go a lot of places, and then just as we grow up, it's just we start to learn more about ourselves and just get through things without control, or how it inhibits or impacts your relationships with people. And I have had an impact on my relationships. My family and I, obviously, you've heard, it was a struggle early on, and it caused resentment for me because I'm just like, all I needed was like support. And
How long did it take you did you get over that resentment? Was there any kind of break?
No, 30 years later, it's there. I'm still, I don't want to use the term ridiculed. I think that's too aggressive, but they still don't understand, or I don't think they want to.
Have you told them that it has a name? That it's
No.
being studied? No. Okay. Yeah.
No.
Dude, you're basically where I am. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, and you're actively being ridiculed by your brother, even your parents?
I wouldn't say actively. So
okay,
there's a bit of a distance.
No, that would be crazy.
Yeah. So I think like you grow mature around things, and you're like, come on,
right.
If you can't handle that, that's fine, whatever.
Yeah,
but there's definitely still not much of an understanding of it. When I leave the room now, if there's that situation, everyone just kind of, in a way, is just like, that's just Bryan.
Oh yeah, eye rolling, And
I can't believe I just made a mouth noise when I said that's Bryan.
It'll be cut out. It's okay.
Perfect. I'll write my diary all night.
Yeah.
But yeah,
so
it's
probably eye rolling and kind of like shrugging shoulders kind of situation.
Well, and
just kind of
I know you're recording, and I don't mind if you leave this in or leave it out, but there's a distance between my family now, so I don't talk to them. Was, I wouldn't say this was, the crux or anything. It was definitely part of it. It was just, wasn't the straw, it wasn't the whole, but it's definitely a combination of things where it's like, my life is emotionally more stable and less stressful. Living my best life, and I'm very unfortunate to say those things out loud, but I love my parents. I love my brother. There's no day that passes where I don't miss them. But I will say that their lack of understanding of this thing that's really, really hard to explain and live through didn't help. So.
Yeah. I understand, man. Yeah, I share a lot of those same things. So yeah, I totally get that, and I think a lot of people listening do, whether they'll come on and share that or not. I know from the notes that I get from people who are wouldn't maybe come on the show. There's a lot of people who are going through the same stuff. So that's why we're doing the show.
Let me kind of say that, because we were exchanging for this. I've never really talked about this with anyone other than my wife.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will say my daughter, she understands it. She's 12 and she understands it more than anyone else I know.
Yeah. 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 Oh, yeah. Maybe let's switch gears and talk about. Yeah. Let's.
Sure.
Let's. You talked about your childhood family. Yeah. I mean, your daughter. So, well, it's interesting. You said your daughter's around 12. Have you,
Mhm.
you know, going through what you went through? Were you thinking about misophonia, either you being triggered by her or she maybe developing it? Because we don't know exactly where it comes from. Or, were you worried about that as she was growing up?
I I'm worried about it for her just so she doesn't have it because her mom
Mm,
is very like my wife is nothing. Everything rolls right off her back. Like it's just like she doesn't understand it, but at the same time, she is empathetic to it. Um, there are times where she's still like, "Oh yeah," um, but for my daughter, it's something where no, she doesn't trigger me to the point. Only if she's doing something like kids be kids, like she's doing something it's just annoying, like banging
yeah.
something on. I mean, that's just kids being kids. That's not
Yeah.
misophonia, but like
Yeah.
not really on the like. Would she be an aggravation? No. I've heard you talk about that in previous discussions, and it's weird that way. It's like I don't have that rage.
Hmm.
Um, where if I'm, in a restaurant and someone, a complete stranger across the way, has no idea that I'm shooting them like the death ray from my eyeballs. But
Yeah.
if my daughter's doing the same thing, I'll just be like, honey, can you stop that? And she'll be like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's okay. And she knows, she understands that I've talked to her about it.
With the
I've
name
said,
and the kind of
yeah,
definition of it and all that stuff. Yeah.
yeah, it is. It's funny though because I got your coffee mug, the Misophonia podcast. And on one
Oh.
side, it truncates to misopho,
Oh
and
God. Really?
my
Is it
daughter
the?
is like, she's like, is that a fear of soup? And I was like, all right, that's a pretty solid joke because it looks like Misoph
Yeah.
podcast. And I'm like, all right, that's all right. But yeah, it truncates right at the handle, but on the other side, it says it fully. So I'm like, all right, just look at the
Yeah.
other side.
All right. I'm
Um,
gonna have to double check the store.
oh,
But
it's totally
anyways.
fine though. It's a good mug. Just for anyone that's looking for merch, it's a great
Right.
mug.
Right.
But no, she's honestly, she's my wife and daughter kind of rocks with this whole charade, and I have friends that understand it too. Like I have a boss who has been more understanding of it than honestly anyone I've ever met. He's been wonderful. Like I've told him before at events, like, hey, if I leave the room, it's not because I find the material boring. It's because the
Yeah.
person next to me has a cup and saucer in 2021, and who drinks from a cup and saucer? So it just and he's unbelievable. He's like, totally get it, get out of here. Like I don't want you in that state. I'm just like that. It's unbelievable to get that from another
Yeah.
human being.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you approach? Because yeah, it's yet another
Yeah.
question that comes up is how did you approach that in the workplace? Like, how did you just kind of go to your boss's office one day
No,
or something? Yeah.
no. So being virtual, ordinarily virtual or traveling, it was something where I just, you build rapport with individuals and you build a relationship. It's not something I'm very forthright with a lot of folks, but built a pretty good rapport. And I just said one day, I said, listen, here's the wiki because that's reliable.
Yeah.
But like, here's this thing. I have this thing, and I just need you to know because we're going to be in certain circumstances where I don't want you to be like, what's going on with Bryan?
Mm-hmm.
And weirdly enough, he was like, actually, I have this other person in his life that has something very similar. So there was a relatability
Yeah.
that was kind of heartwarming in a way, but also just kind of like, okay, cool. We have there's connective tissue as far as the understanding. Um, so yeah, as far as workplace overall, not so much. I don't bring it up that often unless it like presents itself where I'm like, okay, I need to be transparent, genuine, and real. Here's the case. 9 times out of 10, I get, oh, you shouldn't live that way. Yeah, I know. Thanks for that. You should write a book and put it in a Hudson bookseller in the airport. Everyone would buy it. But yeah, you kind of mow through those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess if you're virtual and or traveling a lot, you're not. you're not stuck next to somebody all day for 8 hours a
Yeah.
day, and so it's a little easier maybe to get away. Um, and is that something? Is that kind of environment? Is consulting kind of something you maybe steered towards because of misophonia? I'm curious how the kind of your
I think
career arc
so.
went. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm definitely working from home a lot for probably that reason. So
It's funny. Doing the cubicle world for a few years out of college. And I was like, I got it. In a way, you have to fight or flight. You have to flee this to something. And I came across some individuals who were like, "Oh, you should look into consulting." And it was like this total like advertisement for like, "Oh, you want a winning career." Um, so I just happened to fall in line with a pretty good software company at the time, and that's where it started. And I'm still on it, if you will. And
yeah,
but it is funny, like you back when before in a way the US got really into open workspaces where you walk in and you're like, oh, it's 400 desks all staring at each other.
hmm
um, Europe was kind of ahead of that, so I would go to England for business at times, and that was a test because I'd walk in and go, oh, these aren't cube farms, these are just open workspaces. And so it was interesting. That was my first kind of introduction to the open workspace. And then, sure enough, 18 months later, America's like, oh, let's go to the open workspace thing. It seems to
right.
be it. It's like, dang it. So,
Yep,
yeah.
yep, yeah. I mean, that's yeah. I don't know how. I haven't been in an office environment in a while. I know the last place I worked at when we were in an office, they gave us. I mean, it was just a team of 10, but they gave everyone pretty nice pair of headphones, not noise canceling. But I'm
Yeah.
hoping that was this starts to become a trend, at least.
Yeah, they keep going
So
up in price. I really hope they do. Um,
yeah,
yeah.
right, right.
And I don't know
Um,
if you're like me, I've got a pile of them now. I think I'm up to like three or four.
Oh
Um,
yeah, 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 yeah. No, I've got no, I've got quite a few. I mean, I have the Sonys as well. The Sony W whatever on Amazon Prime that I
yeah,
picked them
they're
up.
great.
I have AirPod Pros here in my ears now, and like I said, I buy like a pack of five of the cheapest possible earbuds as kind of my backup, just in case all else fails. Because yeah, batteries are getting better. Actually, the Sonys hold up quite well, so I'm quite surprised at how long their batteries stay. But you never know when it's going to go out, and then you're kind of like shit out of luck. So
How do you? So I've heard you have a family yourself, correct?
yeah,
How how do they cope? How do they manage a deal? How do they deal with you? And I ask that very selfishly because my wife, after 20 years, it's still not easy.
oh yeah, no, it's not, and yeah, it's just I mean, like I say in the podcast and in meals, it's like you just kind of like um and just tell yourself try beforehand, okay, it's mealtime, it's
Hmm.
gonna be pretty temporary, so there's always life after the meal. Just look forward to that kind of thing, and just kind of
Yeah.
enjoy the meal, enjoy kind of the company for that time. um and but yeah, but also I'll probably end up eating a little bit maybe faster than others so that I can get up and help out with um getting something from the fridge, or changing the music, or doing the dishes or something like that. So
Yeah.
there's just having optionality there kind of reduces the stress level a little bit. But yeah, I mean, generally in I don't know, there's, but it's still kind of tough otherwise, because you never know when um you know when you're going to hear that weird kind of throat sound, or or the
Yeah. Or
after
weird
chew or
any.
whatever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I'm like, no, it's like, it's not worth saying anything. Let me just internally cringe and then see if I can recover. And that's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of where I'm at.
I
Because
haven't.
I definitely don't, try not to react or anything.
I think you have some stuff. Is it posted on GitHub? Did I see that? You had a lot of
Ye
materials.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, so I did yeah, and my GitHub account, and for those who are not engineers, GitHub is kind of like a place, it's basically a social network for nerds and their code, and their projects.
You mean super cool people.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Continue.
sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The 21st century nerd is super cool somehow. I don't know how that transformation happened, but yeah. So I have the whole there's a right a repository, and
Hmm.
for um, less cool people than us nerds, that's just
Yes.
basically a giant document of called awesome misophonia. So there's like awesome in all kinds of topics. So I just did the awesome misophonia list, and yeah, it's got a bunch of like all the latest research, and I don't know, I
Yeah.
think news articles and things like that. I've recently put all of those into, I haven't updated that in a while, but I put them into the Misophonia mobile app that I just launched recently. And so
Oh,
I'm going to be updating that with basically that'll be the latest. But yeah,
got
yeah,
it.
it's
I
just,
have
it's
not
just
been a good
coming.
subscriber. I did not download the app yet, but it's coming
Okay, well,
soon.
thank you very much and have a good note. But yeah.
We'll go ahead and cut this short. It's been a good discussion.
Well, the app has a bunch of bugs, so the next version will be the version 2 that's coming in a couple days will be the one
Version two
I
is going to
probably
be
promote
amazing.
more. Yeah. Anyways,
I love. Well, the reason I brought it up, so I saw the awesome thing.
yeah.
I did hear about your app earlier, so I have listened to your podcast at least once. But I think there's stuff out there as far as misophonia. It's interesting to me how certain things do trigger a deal, but don't trigger person Y.
Hmm.
And I fumble with that one because I've asked people who know I have this, and they're like, you know how it is. It's like dance, go dance over there because you have this thing. And it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's weird. But it's like, hey, does that bother you? Does this bother you? And it's like, weirdly, no, that one doesn't bother me. But then in my mind, I'm like, should it?
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
there's people who've come on who've like, yeah, I mean, eating doesn't bother me, but like I don't know, hands clapping really loudly together or things like, yeah, some people there's a kind of
yeah,
like it's kind of like a I don't know if my if I'm too removed from my math training, but it's kind of like a Gaussian curve where there's kind of like a strong middle, and then there's kind of like some fringes. And I'm definitely towards the middle. But yeah, there are some other people who have triggers that are very different than
yeah,
mine, don't really overlap that much. So,
it's interesting. Yeah,
I mean, some people
yeah.
love after chewing, but yeah, most
After,
people don't.
no, they shouldn't. Um, yeah, it's
Is
30 years later, like I said, it's still pretty. Yeah, it resonates pretty strong.
yeah.
It's tough.
So has it basically from that? It just kind of like so. What happened outside of the home then at the time?
Uh-huh.
Was it affecting you in school, like grades wise and
Yeah.
socially too?
Yeah. From that point, like I would call myself a B plus student in
Hmm.
those days, and then I went off to college. Split some time after college. I joined the military. I was in the Navy. And it was weird. It was right around the time. So in college, I struggled with it. My freshman and sophomore year in
Mm.
college, and then I jumped off and joined the military because not because of misophonia, but I definitely was back in the classroom. Um, gum chewers be damned. It was a very hard ecosystem to be a part of, especially again in that kind of like what's wrong with me kind of moment.
Hmm.
uh, why am I getting so angry about these things? And why do I have to like, in a way, I would almost have to leave a class sometimes if I was surrounded or put in a position where it was just I was at the front of the room, not the back of the room.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I went off to the military, you're in such a weird kind of vacuum of things where it kind of went away for a while, where I didn't really think about because you're just in a constant state of like, okay, what's next? Um,
This is in
and
combat or in training or
No, yeah, no. So I was nothing like that. So I was pre 9/11. So I was in a very different military. I like to explain that,
mm,
like, nothing but love to everyone who ever, serves in any capacity in that realm. But it just, I don't want to downplay mine, but it was a very different world when I was in the military. And it's just, no, but it's very regimented, structured. It's very, you're kind of a family and all these kind of things. So it's just, after the first few months, I kind of forgot about my misophonia. It was weird. And I was just so busy for that time. So then I left the military and then went back and finished college, and returning to college, I went, oh yeah, that's right. I hate being in rooms with 22 people, and they're all doing an array of things, clicking pens, that whole, cacophony of horrible sounds. And I was like, oh yeah, this sucks. But I powered through, and I got a business degree and information systems. That's where the coding background and all that kind of stuff comes from. But it's I always tell my wife, I'm like, I'm just a business major. You can't expect much from me. But it was, and then from there on, it was very much part of my life. Like, it was always there.
Yeah. And when did you start to it's interesting, there's just a bunch of people, and I think myself included, who in the early 20s, it seems like it kind of fell off the radar and then just came back. For me, I'm pretty sure it was like, actually, I guess it wasn't an open office environment, but it was, there was, that came later, when I hit the open office and listening to the Diet Coke sipping and whatnot. But there was a previous job to that where I was it's kind of consulting, working out of my boss's basement, and that had there were some issues there. But I really didn't know what it was. I was just knew that I was kind of being perturbed. Yeah, interesting. And then okay, so then did you just start to Google around for what it is? I'm curious, kind of how you discovered that there were others out there.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that the spiral of the iPad before bed, if you will, and okay, I finished the internet tonight. Let me go ahead and go to bed now. And it's just, I think one night I was just looking stuff up around. Honestly, I think it might have been my wife and I had an argument about it. She's just like, you gotta talk to somebody. There's got to be a medicine or something like that. And I may have been online that night. I just went, misophonia. No way. And it was like, I think it was like, you would know better. It was like the Oxford, or it came from, I think, the UK.
There's a lot of research happening in the UK. Yeah.
And that was my moment of, oh my God, it's a thing. And from there on, and then I don't know, it was about a year ago, I think I was skiing with my daughter, and on the way back, we found your podcast on Spotify, and that's when I had originally emailed you a long, long time ago.
Okay,
we were in our 30s, a deal. But yeah, and that's and my daughter actually was like, "Hey, let's listen to this podcast," and she's like, "Hey, that's what you have," and it's like, pardon my French, son of a bitch, like that. Yeah, it's a thing.
Do you remember which episode that was that you first heard?
No, I don't.
Okay,
I can email you after if you want me.
Yeah, I would just be curious. Yeah.
Yeah. I really I'll tell you though, I really enjoyed your discussion. I think it was Claire.
I think you mentioned in an email. Yeah, I've had a few Claires. So now I'm not sure which one it was. But
she wasn't the first one, but this recent one you did, that you posted recently, mind you. It may have been earlier in the year, but I really enjoyed her discussion because I kind of identified with it. Her riding in the car with her father. Same thing. Like, if I ever had to get in the car with my dad and he's like, let me pop in some gum before we get on the road, I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, it's
ironically, was it the Claire that works in an ice cream shop? Because that would be really ironic or interesting coincidence. But
no, and I may have the different episode. Yeah, I think it was the fashion photographer.
Oh, Christina. Yeah.
Christina, yes, hers, yes. And Claire was the ice cream shop. I did listen to that one. But no, the year ago one, I can't recall, but I'll go back and look. But yeah, that was the podcast. And then just learning about it, reading a few things here and there, and just, I mean, there's a community that I never knew existed. And it's that moment of like, I genuinely, for a long time, and I know you share this and a lot of others share this, I was like, what the hell is wrong with me? Yeah. It's I used to use terms like, listen, kind of insane. You know, it was very self-deprecating around like, listen,
Yeah.
I'm kind of a weirdo.
Right.
Can you not eat bananas like that? You know, it's like, can you not chew apples and make them mushy with your mouth? It's, yeah. So it came together again.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Okay. Um, so yeah, I guess so then day to day, like maybe what are your kind of your go-to coping methods? Other than obviously your battery of headgear and
Right.
headphones.
Emotional outbursts.
Yeah.
Um, I don't do great, Adil. I don't. If you know, my wife always says she hates traveling with me. She's always like, she and my daughter will walk about 20 feet behind me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very regimented, like, I very much know what to avoid and when to avoid.
Yeah.
And there's something about it where like I can almost anticipate, like, it's like, you know, you're sitting somewhere in a restaurant and you're like, oh, please don't put that family next to us. You just know they're going to chew with their mouth open, and bam, they're right next to you.
Yeah, they always get put there. Yeah.
They always get put there. I always joke with my wife, if I'm traveling and there's a basketball team on a floor of a hotel, I will be the one guy on that floor that's not on the basketball team, because they're just making noise all night, banging the basketball or whatever. I've literally stayed at a hotel in Penn Station, New Jersey, and a UFC fighting group was on the floor with me.
God.
And I banged on my wall. And the next morning I was like, oh, I could have died. But yeah, it's
you would think that they would
fail.
need to get rest more than others, so get some
you would
sleep.
think so. Yeah, you would think so. So that, like, or if you know you're on the plane and it's just like, okay, who's the loudest gum chewer to board the plane? There they are. They're coming right here next to me.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's without fail. So it's just coping. I'm not great at. I listen to some of the stuff you guys talk about here. It's tough. It's tough. You know, I still have my moments even at home where I have to remove myself, and it's just I've never figured that out a deal, and I don't know if it's like, am I not focusing hard enough? Am I not trying hard enough? It's so aggravating, but I always just finding serenity.
People are, yeah. No, man, there's people around the world who are still asking the same questions, so no one's figured it out yet. Have you since that quote unquote analyst, have you gone to other therapists in your adult life?
Yeah.
About this or anything else? And I'm curious what their reaction to miso is.
I have probably seen 10 therapists from the age of 14 to now, like separate, like individual ones. Some off and on, a year here, a year there. Antidepressants pretty strong. I don't want to go too much into it. I'm okay sharing this. I have a history of SI, so suicidal ideation. I have a pretty strong OCD. Like, it's just all those things we've heard on previous podcasts. But I've worked through therapists on some of the SI stuff pretty strong.
Yeah.
You asked me how I've been doing on the pandemic. You know, I didn't want to make this podcast about, but last year was pretty tough for everybody. So I don't want to make it about myself. But yeah, last year sucked. It was tough. But for therapy and all those, I would say I've never had any of them understand or know what it was.
Yeah. I
always got, well, have you tried Zoloft? And I'm like, oh, you're just reaching for the no. And always the funny thing was, I'm already on that, so why are you prescribing something?
Right, that's the biggest SSRI I think there
exactly.
is. Right? Yeah.
I'm like, exactly. So it was never understood, and even like family practice or internal medicine doctors that I would go see for a physical and things like, I would mention it, and they would just look at me and be like, "Yeah, it sounds like you just need more rest." And I'm like, "Oh, thanks for that." Wipe the slate clean.
Yeah, for me it's like, so who diagnosed that for you? I was like, self-diagnosed, and then they just tab the next field on the computer. But
everything is so computer based too. It's like when you say you have it, you can hear them hitting the pick list, and they're like, "Well, I don't see it under M. Did you say it was with an M?" Like, you know what? Forget it. Just forget it. Right, I went to the doctor on Friday, Adil, and I had the keyboard situation in the waiting room. I was very aggravated when I hit the room, and the doctor comes in, and she typed with a purpose on this keyboard, and I was like, very polite. And I was like, listen, I have to tell you, I have a sensitivity to certain sounds, and your absolute destruction of that keyboard is on the list. And I didn't intend the sarcasm to be completely out there. She's like, oh, I'll take my hands off of it. And I was like, yeah, it's a thing called misophonia. She goes right back to the keyboard. And I'm like, I didn't mean take a break for 5 seconds. I meant, can you just, first of all, take it easy. You're going to break the thing. But secondly, just for the love of God, just, can you write it with a pen? Like, just don't click it. But just, there's all these rules we have. But I was very open with her, and she was very cool. She went, you know what? Thank you for telling me. I'm going to do my best. Let me know if you're having that moment. And that again was a really nice moment of, oh, she heard me. And and I was trying to be cool because the rage. I say that. Do you know the rage, right? Adil? It's that. It's a horrible feeling, and people don't realize. Well, why are you always angry? I don't want to be angry. So I'm sure in my chart it says something like, this guy's a nut. Like, he comes in a curmudgeon. Like, just,
they can say whatever they want as long as they have for me, as long as in my opinion, at this point where we are in medical awareness, as long as they have the word misophonia that can be indexed in a search engine, that can be looked at by researchers, like, that's we just need to start there. And then we can work on the keyboards and stuff after that, but let's just get to the basics because we're so far behind.
My favorite was I had someone literally in the medical profession be like, it sounds like you might just need a tension tamer tea. And I'm just like
the tea,
like the celestial seasonings tea. And I'm like, no, again, like, I don't know why I even paid the copay. Like, you guys are killing me. Digressing on that, I'm getting there, but I don't think the medical field has gotten there just yet. No fault of theirs. It's new. These things take time.
So, and then just to, I don't want to get, obviously too much, like you said, too much into your comorbidities and stuff. But do you think where do you think, I've had a lot of people come on with other comorbidities, and I'm always curious, just wanted to see if you had any thoughts on like that kind of causation, chicken and egg kind of thing. Like, how much do you think misophonia is totally separate or may have been the source of a little bit of some of these other things, or vice versa? I'm curious if you've ever thought about that. If not, like, we can move on or whatever. But
no, I think they're related, Adil. I really do. Like, you think of OCD, like, I've worked through it, but I used to count quite heavily. Like, I had a pretty aggressive what about Bob kind of moment in my life. And I think they're all pretty related. I heard your discussion with another individual about this specifically, and it was interesting to me because I started thinking about it before our discussion. Like, it's just, there's no easy button. We are who we are. I'm coming to terms with that in my middle of my life.
Yeah. Same.
And it's a good feeling, but it's also like you said, like, I'm watching my daughter going, oh, please don't have this. Like, don't, and if she does, I'll be there. But I don't know. I'm not, I would say, smart enough with all the stuff going on as far as misophonia, and I hear things of spectrum and all that. And it's like, what? I am who I am, and I just got to be the best Bryan. And I think I'm close to there, but I'll tell you, the pandemic did not help. I don't know about you, Adil. This pandemic is for the birds. But so for me, it was just like, there was, at the beginning, it seemed like, okay, well, there's some interesting things. Like, I don't have to necessarily be around a ton of people. I don't have to, I don't have to be seated near the crazy family because I can just do takeout and that's okay. So it seemed, in some ways it seemed better, but then the claustrophobia kind of sets in at home, for one. Yes.
And actually, honestly, for me, it was the biggest thing because I like the podcast, I felt, and like, being a techie, have all these other projects that I like the I don't mind being at home and being able to work on stuff, but the kind of claustrophobia, and then also trying to make sure that everyone in the house is mentally okay. That kind of stress
Right.
too. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing. I want to make sure everyone else is happy first before me, because we're used to kind of like worrying about ourselves last. And
Did
so
it
at least,
did it ever break you though, Adil, like being real? Because like that selflessness I feel is
yeah,
prominent with
hmm
individuals like you and I. But like I'll tell you, it took a toll because I was so worried about my wife and daughter.
yeah.
It kind of broke me last July.
hmm
I'm
I think
curious how you did.
I think there were some close calls that I probably just kind of like was able to get over, but definitely there were times
Hmm.
when internally I was just like, freaking out, like, and
Hmm.
probably, I think, if not fantasizing, but like imagining myself saying things or just kind of acting out or whatever. And then I just tried to remember that, we are just in a really unusual situation. And if I were ever to, I don't know, just like yell or scream or just in general, then that would have the opposite effect of what I was going for. Kind of,
Yeah.
that would be the main problem. Then it wouldn't really be about the pandemic anymore. So I didn't want to be the center of the problem. But honestly, I hate to say it, but well, I don't know, I hate to say it, but maybe it's a good thing about Misophonia that Misophonia kind of trained me for that. Because
Yeah.
I'm like always thinking about how to not make a scene, and
Hmm.
so I don't think I ever. Well, I don't know. I don't think I think there were definitely a few times when I was probably more frustrated with my daughter on some stupid thing than I probably needed to
Sure.
be, but I think I got through without making the types of scenes that I probably imagined I might make, kind of thing. I don't know if that
Yeah.
made any
We
sense.
it weirdly it did because that's the last 18 plus months of our lives. Um, I think the thing for me was my wife and I and my daughter, we all agreed one of the three of us was usually going to be down, aggravated, annoyed,
Hmm.
angered. And we always were like, okay, the majority has to help that, one third. And we
Yeah.
always kind of had that approach of like pick each other up. Every now and again, two-thirds of us would be in that moment. And we're like, okay, it's time to get outside and breathe fresh air and all those kind of things. But we usually found the law was one third of us was in that moment. We just had to pick each other up. Um, it sounds simple now, but in the moment, as we all know, it was pretty tough. And as far as the miso element, I think it did exacerbate a bit when I went back to doing a few things these last few months because it's pretty heightened. Like I feel like I'm like DEFCON 1 when I
Hmm.
go in public now, and I'm like, oh my god, I used to be able to maintain DEFCON 2 or 3. For any of the military nerds out there that want to look up DEFCON, it's from 1 to 5, I think. 1 being the worst. Um, but I'm trying to do my best NPR
Yeah.
voice to make that work. But I think it's really heightened. And my wife even has acknowledged that. She's like, you are, like, she knows where I usually am, but she's like, you are
Hmm.
way more sensitive, and not in a negative way. But she's like, you are way more sensitive to things right now. And I'm like, I know it's
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah. Well, the interesting is, so two things, again, about me. One thing I, um, didn't even forgot to mention was, speaking of last July, is when we had another
Yeah.
newborn, so that was a good distraction.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
And so that
Congratulations.
was
Yeah.
all that was all good, and that's kind of like defined kind of everything since then. So
Yeah.
that's been great. The other thing is looking towards the future. I'm like, um, one thing that frustrates me is that because it's been dragging out, I'm kind of ready for the future where the rest of the household is out there doing normal stuff, and I can kind of like, I don't know, for some reason social distancing for me is we've gone through physical distancing, but I feel
Yes.
like with all the new stuff and also the misophonia, I think I'm going to be doing some social distancing for a while, or at least a recalibration. So that's one thing that's also kind of made me, I don't know, you know how we are. We try to look for any kind of
Yes.
optimism we can find. And so I'm hoping that, again, misophonia is maybe hopefully training me to a more recalibrated kind of like rethinking, like what's important to me, like what would make me happy, what do I not have to wait should not waste my time on in the
I
future. So I'm
love
looking
that.
forward to that. But
Yeah.
I think I'm probably heightened a little bit in frustration because this fucking thing is dragging on longer than it needs to. So
No, it's you summarized for everyone listening as well. That yeah, Deal just said it. Like it's just the discourse too, the
yeah,
divisiveness. It just goes back to what we teach our kids of just be cool, and it's really hard to do that. Again, when you turn on the news for 15 seconds and have to explain the unexplainable, and it's
right.
just like, God damn it, society, you're killing me right now. I wish I just
Hmm.
had that weird thing with noises, but you keep doing this to me. Um, it's just you just got to be good to each other. But I'll again digress on that point because we got a ways
Yeah,
to go.
right, right. Well, let's talk about, I guess, yeah, one other thing I wanted to talk about was other misophonia. So you have not met anybody else, right, that you know has misophonia? It seems like this I'm the first person outside your family.
Um, I'm racking my brain. No, I have a friend from work whose partner has me. So I've never
Mm-hmm.
met them, but she and I have spoken about it because when she it's just off, it's just happenstance that it came up, and when she found out I had it, it became kind of an understanding mechanism for her and her partner, and
Ah,
like asking me like, hey, not he does this, what do I do? But it was very like just kind of understanding discussion, and it was a little helpful for me actually to hear. I was like, oh yeah, he and I are pretty similar.
mm-hmm.
I think that's one. I'm trying to think of anyone else. I don't think anyone is aggressive. I do hear a lot like people go, oh, my sister's like that, or oh, I've got
Oh
a buddy
yeah,
who doesn't like chewing gum, and I'm like, he didn't listen to me, and it's like, okay. Um, but no,
yeah,
I don't think directly I've known anyone
yeah.
to have it. It is interesting though, so I'll go full circle. My father, I do feel like he has a lot of the traits that I have, like a lot of these afflictions. I do feel like my dad has anxiety. I feel like he has depression, but he is from that even further generation where the cliche of you don't talk about stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me because I don't fault my parents for anything and all that kind of stuff, but I do see some of my father and me in that sense of controlling a situation and all these kind of other elements. Now we all handle things differently, um, so it's funny. It's like maybe I have met someone with it, and he didn't acknowledge it, and I didn't know it. But
Do you remember any um things that he may have done or said? Because you said that when around the time when the ice cream
yeah,
incident happened, there was some anti-father things going
yeah,
on. I'm wondering if was there any I don't know, specific behaviors that he was or something between you guys.
yeah. I think it was there, and this was all perception. So for myself, and my perception was it's a bit distant as a
Mm-hmm.
dad.
Mm-hmm.
He was there, but he wasn't very involved or active. He was kind of at that midlife. I was at that point. He was probably in his own midlife. Is this it? And I think as human beings, we all hit that. I think I hit that, but we all handled it differently. And I think he had
Yeah.
that moment of, is this it? I've got these two teenage sons, but he just wasn't there. He wasn't like, hey, how's school going? He was never that. Um,
Right.
so
Okay.
I think he was going through his own motions,
Mm-hmm.
and then in turn, it spirals as a family when that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, it's just was that something that caused traumatic stress to spark this thing in me? I don't know. My brother doesn't have it. He's the exact opposite of me, where it just he's got his own things, but like this is something where he's just like, yeah, that's weird.
So does he have your brother have, and we don't have to get into it, but
Mm-hmm.
does he have other things that he gets help with? Like, I mean, he's curious if, because yeah, there was, it doesn't seem like there was much empathy. I'm always curious, like, do other people have other things, but then yet they're still unsympathetic to ours?
Yeah, I think my brother's is. I think he's similar to me. He did. I don't think he has misophonia.
Mm-hmm.
I can guess that he does have a level of anxiety or depression.
Mm-hmm.
but he's the quintessential prideful, kind of insecure guy that would never ever tell his younger brother that.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Mm-hmm.
only 12 months apart, but he would never have that moment of,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I feel that. He would almost just, punch me in the arm and be like, you're weak, that kind of thing. And it's like,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, apparently we're still 11, but that's cool.
Right,
Um,
right.
yeah, so I do think he has some stuff, but he's not as open about it. Like me doing that, my brother would never do something like this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'm doing this just because I think the community is fantastic. And on behalf of everyone, not to finish this or anything, I'm not fast forwarding, but like, I appreciate you, Adil. Like this, I listen to these when I'm on any drive for more than 40 minutes. I'm like, let me pop in and listen. And it's always enlightening for me. So I do thank you for doing what you're doing.
No, that's good. It's great to hear. And yeah, I mean, you're right. The community is awesome, and it often gets reduced to like oversimplifications, or people,
Yeah.
even people like in our community just ranting on Facebook and Reddit, because that's what those forums end up looking like. Just they look like a bunch of rants, but there's more. Having talked to people at the conventions, there is more to the story. There are more similarities and there's more depth, and so that's
Well,
what this is all about.
I can hit on some of your cliches, like the
Do it.
comorbidities, but here we go, creativity. So here's the last one.
Yeah.
So positives, what are the sounds we enjoy? And I'd love to hear the ones for you. Like for me, it's wind through the aspens. My daughter and I, if you ever listen to wind going through aspen trees, it's this amazing sound. And I also play guitar. So the sound of a new set of guitar strings on a guitar to me is just, that's everything. Like just that first strum of having that thing tuned.
Yeah.
There are things that bring me joy from sound. And that's the thing is you're right. It does become this like, let me vent, almost vitriolic, like, statements around, people doing certain things. But I'm like, there is a lot of stuff out there that's enjoyable. But the creative thing was interesting to me because a lot of people you discuss with, I've always been somewhat of a pseudo artist. I've always, I've been drawing since I was like 4 years old. I play guitar now for many, many years. And I've drawn to that side of my brain in a really heavy-handed way. It's that whole, like, in a perfect world, I would love to just create, that element. It's that whole, well, Bryan, why don't you live your life and do that? I'm like, because I'm way too risk averse to ever chase my dreams.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's a common thing that I've heard in your talks, and I always find that one interesting too. Is that there's very much that side of the brain that's used in the artistic, creative sense. I mean, even yourself being an engineer, like that's a creative element. You're designing things, you're creating things. It's very interesting how a lot of us are in that mindset.
Well, we're into things that I guess require a bunch of focus, like it's a bunch of just sitting and, sitting and thinking and pulling something out of our minds and putting it out there, whether it's, music or something technical. So,
yeah. You're going to take out the little mouth noises I've made.
Oh, right? Yeah, okay. For sure. Hang on one second or something. Okay. Mm-hmm. I just unpaused there. Well, I mean, I didn't want to, no, this is a great way to end on, because I think, your creativity has become, something that's come up more, and people are bringing it up more in some of these episodes. So that's really interesting to hear. That's really cool. The wind through the aspen. Do you have maybe a recording? I've been getting more into field recordings recently, so it would be interesting to kind of maybe to hear some of these sounds that kind of like please listeners.
I was hiking with my daughter, and she's like, "That's a really that's one of my favorite sounds," and it was this really like kind of passing moment, and then I was like, that's a really good point. Like, that's a really cool sound. And so over time, I've realized, I really like that sound.
I'll have to search if I can find it on freesound.org or something.
Yeah. Wind through the aspens. It sounds like a really bad autobiography. Yeah.
Well, cool. Bryan, this is great. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities to my life. So it's been really interesting to hear. I'd love to keep in touch and maybe
Always, yeah.
We'll definitely be hanging out at some point. I don't know when, but that'd be it'd be great to keep in touch. Um, let's well, before we go, anything else you want to share? Anything else you want to tell people who are listening, who might be like us?
No, like I think it's just, I mean, it's a very selfish moment for me of like realizing that, you're not alone and all those things. So just telling people what they haven't already heard through your podcast, it's just the community. It's strong. We've all got a ways to go just because we're dealing with this and we deal with it every day, every moment.
Thank you, Bryan. Like I said, I'd love to hang sometime. I really hope your holidays with family are a good one. And that also goes for everyone listening. If you like this episode, don't forget to leave a quick review or just hit the 5 stars wherever you listen to this podcast. You can hit me up by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or go to the website, misophoniapodcast.com. All the links are in the show notes. It's even easier to send a message on Instagram at Misophonia Podcast. You can follow there. Follow on Facebook at Misophonia Podcast. And Twitter, it's a little different. It's Misophonia Show. And don't forget, you can support the show now by visiting the Patreon at patreon.com/Misophonia Podcast. Music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.